حبوبي بالوصال نعم علي وجد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين اللهم إني نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So, subhanAllah, we've reached the final session that you'll have with me in this wonderful, beautiful retreat. And as far as my classes are concerned, what a beautiful way to conclude discussing a topic that is so central, but also so neglected in the sense of what we understand of it and are able to make use of its function and role in our tradition. And that is the discussion around the aql and what it is and the role that it plays in our deen. But before we get to that, the Imam's always keen to demonstrate what he refers to as the sharaf of the aql, which is the nobility of the aql. And he makes what we would call a fortiori argument, because he says that the nobility of the aql is linked to the nobility, the sharaf of ilm. And since knowledge can only occur because of the aql, and because knowledge in itself is noble, it follows in a stronger sense that the aql is also something which is honored and noble in our tradition. And from there we see that he gets straight into the discussion about the aql. And we can frame it to start off with by just putting some questions forward, which are in a form of statements that we hear, that the aql is either important for matters of the deen, or the aql shouldn't be used to determine matters of the deen. Or we may hear things such as children are not aqil, or all humans are aqil. There seems to be contradictory statements. Are children aqil or not? Because if all humans are, then a child isn't aqil, is a human, then why is a child not an aqil? Or are you going to trust your aql over the Quran? We hear these sorts of statements all the time. And these sorts of statements can sometimes make us feel as if the aql has a very limited role in our tradition, or sometimes even no role at all. And hence we get these sorts of disparaging statements or confusing statements. So the question is, how are we supposed to understand this slippery term in our tradition? Now, being the genius thinker that he is, Imam al-Ghazali is well aware of this. He understands that the word aql, the term aql, is what we would call in English a polysemous term, which is to say that it carries many meanings. More than one meaning. For example, in Arabic we have the word ayn, and anyone who knows Arabic knows that the ayn can either mean the globular organ in your head, or it can mean a spy, or it can mean the fount where the river comes from. And all of these are referred to as an ayn. In fact, it can even refer to an entity, a thing, an ayn. And you only know which one you're referring to based on context. And so the word aql is similar to that, it carries many meanings. And what the scholars tell us about such terms or such ideas is that we must be very, very careful, because there's a saying in Arabic within the sciences that al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi, which is to say that you must know what something is before you can say something about it. Because if you don't know what it is, what can you possibly say about it? Nothing. Because not knowing something is as good as it not being in existence for you. If someone wanted to clarify or know about an Eskimo, for instance, maybe not a good example in cold England, and they'd never heard of the word, how could this person possibly say anything about an Eskimo? They don't even know what the word means. And the same is true when we have any statement of the form X is Y, if we don't know what the X is. We don't have the frame. Like Shaykh Yahya mentioned a couple of days ago, that if you've never seen a door close by lifting the handle up, you literally the door will be left open. And there's a fault in the door. Right? No, but because we've seen it, what's the first thing? Okay, it closes like that. So this individual, because they didn't understand, didn't have the frame, weren't able to pass judgment on the possible options that are available to him to close the door. Didn't exist for him. And so Imam al-Ghazali says that the term aql has four distinct but interrelated meanings. Four distinct but related meanings. The first of the four is the Imam describing the aql in terms of an innate ability that Allah has created in the human, so as to engage in the process of inferential reasoning. So I'll repeat that. It's an innate ability that Allah has created in the human so as to engage in the process of inferential reasoning. What's inferential reasoning? It's going from things you know to things you don't know. Because you can only get to things you don't know from things you do know. If it were the case that we didn't know anything at all, we would never actually ever be able to know anything. So you go from things that you know to the things that you don't know. And so the aql in this first meaning is just that innate. Imam Ghazali calls it ghariza. And for want of not wanting to fall into my own cautions yesterday about translating, just give me some rope here, as they say, just to get the discussion flowing. That it's an ability, an innate ability that Allah has created in us, so that we as humans can engage in a process of inferential reasoning, going from things that we know to things that we don't know. And it's this property that differentiates a human from beasts. Animals don't have this ability. They can't engage in a process of inferential reasoning as we can. The second meaning of aql, he says, it's a particular type of knowledge. So the first one is just an ability. The second is a type of knowledge. And it's a type of knowledge that one attains, or I should say the other way, that when one attains it, one is said to be mature. But not mature in a sense of language, in a sense of law. You are what's called compos mentis. You have reached the age of legal discernment. The reason why they link it to puberty in our tradition is because ordinarily that's when it occurs. Doesn't mean it has to, that when someone reaches the age of puberty, that you have reached the age of intellectual maturity. No, there's not a logical link. It's not that it's inseparable. it's ordinarily the case that when you reach puberty, you would have reached the stage of intellectual maturity. But what is that state? What is that knowledge? The Imam, and again for want of being technical here, that a sign of one attaining intellectual maturity, capacity, is the ability to what the Imam describes discerning between different modal states. What are modal states? Possibility, necessity, and contingent. I beg your pardon. Possibility, necessity, and impossibility. These three. I'm going to get to what these are in a second. Possibility, some sort of contingency, necessity, and impossibility. Now, without needing to explain what these terms are, what the Imam, because he knows, look, this is not a technical text, so he gives examples instead, which is always pedagogically instructive. So the examples he gives is 2 is greater than 1. It's impossible for 1 to be greater than 2. We know that. So he's making us want to understand, he's inviting us to understand the idea of impossibility by giving us an example. 2 is greater than 1, i.e. it's impossible for 1 to be greater than 2. Oh yeah, we get that. A person cannot be in 2 places at the same time. It's necessary for a person to be in a single space at a given time. Or if you look at it a different way, it's impossible for a person to be in 2 places at the same time. No one's going to disagree with that. Something cannot be both black and white at the same time in the same respect. Cannot here means impossible. Something that is living cannot be dead at the same time. Something cannot be both moving and still at the same time. A whole is bigger than the part. Very easy examples to understand. But when we say impossible or necessary in the above examples, what's going to help us in understanding them is to look at them through the lens of conceivability. In other words, it is conceivable. Is it conceivable for something to be both dead and alive at the same time? Conceivable. We've removed impossibility from the discussion now. We've removed necessity from the discussion now. We've brought in another term, conceivability. Can you conceive of something being in 2 different places at the same time? Right? So this conceivability criterion is what helps us understand necessity, impossibility, and contingency. But this conceivability criterion does something else as well. It removes us from what is termed empirical impossibility or empirical necessity. Because again, just as aql is a term that's used with different meanings, so is impossibility, so is the word necessity. So by introducing conceivability as a criterion, he's removing us from empirical impossibilities, empirical necessities, empirical impossibilities. Now, let's take some examples. It is impossible for someone to fly. This is an empirical impossibility. It's not a logical impossible. Why? Because you can conceive someone to be flying in the air. It's not logically impossible. It's impossible for the moon to be split in 2. Right? Empirically. Not logically. Why? Because we can conceive of that idea. We cannot conceive of a square circle though, can we? Can we conceive of a square circle? No. So it's empirically impossible, but logically impossible as well. Now, the aspect of the mind that allows humans to carry out or engage in these logical operations of the mind are what makes someone legally responsible in Sharia. I'll tell you why. Because were you to ask a child the above, it would look at you confused. And it might even say yes. If you said to the child, can something be both moving and still at the same time? Probably look at you and think, yeah, why not? Or it just wouldn't understand what you're saying. Can something be both living and dead at the same time? Can something be both black and white at the same time in the same respect? It really will struggle, or at least you need some further moves in your explanation or question to get the child to understand that. And the reason why the child won't be able to see that is because the child at that age won't understand what does it mean for something to be impossible or necessary or contingent. But the moment that it does, that's the moment that it moves into the realm of being considered legally responsible. Because in this room, as soon as I say to someone something can't be both living and dead, no one's going to argue with that. It means everyone's... So you don't have to understand what the technical aspect of impossibility or necessity. It's just the examples are enough. And so this is the meaning of aql when we when we say that a child is not aqil. The second meaning. In the first meaning, the child is aqil because it still has the innate ability. It just hasn't flowered yet. In the second meaning, which is knowing impossibilities, it doesn't have aql in that sense. Hence, it's not legally responsible. Now, and it's this second category that provides the basis for these logical operations of the mind, for us to engage in the process of reasoning. Now, the third meaning is a type of knowledge that one acquires through repeated observations of empirical phenomena. That we acquire this knowledge through repeated observations of empirical phenomena. It's akin to what we would call today science. Inductive, empirical knowledge. Inductive, i.e. something that happens again and again and again. And because you've seen it happen that many times, you conclude from that, it's going to happen again. Not because it's logically necessary, but because you've seen it occur that many times. If you had a cotton ball made of cotton wool, and you threw it into fire and it burnt. Oh, okay. You'd never seen fire in your life, and you threw it into the fire and it burns. So, okay, let me take another one. It does the same thing. Take another one. Once you've done it enough time, and it differs from person to person, by the way, that once you've seen, okay, this thing here, we don't have a name for it right now. We can call it fire, but this person doesn't have a name for it. It doesn't even know what it does. But it's testing it out. It comes to recognize certain things. So once it's seen that the fire burns the cotton, it concludes that fire burns cotton. But this statement is a statement of our observations of the world. It's not a statement that's given to us just by our minds. It's not a logically necessary statement. We come to the truth of this by experience. And so these sorts of examples, water quenches thirst, fire burns wool, etc., these are another sense of when you say someone is aqil. If you know that fire burns wool, you know that water quenches thirst, and all similar statements, you are said to be aqil in this sense. And in Arabic, you say to someone that huwa ghabi if you don't accept these. A loose translation would be someone stupid. Not in a pejorative sense, but just in a factual sense that what's given to our observation, you're just denying it. You're ghabi. You're denying the evidence of your senses. So that's the third meaning. The fourth meaning is the ultimate end goal of this innate ability. It's the ultimate al-ghayatul quswa. It's the ultimate end goal of number one. What's number one? The innate ability. And the ultimate end goal of this innate ability is to come to know the ultimate consequences of our actions. Whether those consequences are proximate or remote. So I'm using my ability to reason, and I'm looking into my actions. Either what the consequence will be immediately now, or what the consequence will be many rungs down the ladder. As Shaykh Yahya mentioned a couple of days ago, the Native Americans What did they say? They would never take communal decisions until they had thought about the effect of their decisions on 7 subsequent generations. That's wisdom. And so the fourth meaning, which is using, number one, our innate ability to come to know the ultimate consequences of our actions, whether these consequences are remote. For example, if I just push my laptop, I know there's a glass of water there. I know immediately what's going to happen. But what's the second, third, fourth order? It's going to make your clothes wet. It may make your book wet. You may need to go and buy another book. You might not have enough money for it. You have to do more hours for that. The thobe wasn't yours, you borrowed it from someone. Look how many consequences you're thinking about. That's the ultimate purpose of one. It's so you can engage in this world of thinking about the consequences of everything that we as human beings can do. And the more the more remote you can become in your understanding of consequences, i.e. understanding all these far-fetched consequences, is the more aqil that you are. It's a beautiful way of looking at it. Why? Because if someone is said to be aqil in this fourth sense, i.e. possessed of aql, you are said to be more aqil if you can see the furthest ahead. The more you can see into the flow of actions, the more aqil that you are. In other words, Allah has placed this ghariza, this innate ability in us to actualize the meaning of aql. It's on account of this fourth meaning that one is able to subjugate one's desires. And as a result of that, to rise above the level of beasts and to enter into the realm of an angelic realm. And it's because of this fourth meaning that we're able to move away from sin into obedience. Because we've recognized what the end goals of everything, of all of our actions are. Let's have a brief summary here. That the range of the first meaning of aql, i.e. an innate ability, is the most general sense of the word. It refers to the whole set of humans. The innate ability. It's the most general sense. This last sense of aql, the fourth one, which is looking at the end consequences, and the further you can look, is the most narrow subset. Because there's not that many people that will fall into being able to determine not because they can't, because they choose not to. They've not used the gift that Allah has given us and put it into practice, because there's not a single person here that isn't able to sit down and think, yeah, that third slice of cake might actually not be good for me. Right? But the fact that we don't isn't because we don't have an aql, it's because we're allowing our desires to get the better of us. And you can go on ad infinitum. Any action that we have, you can assess what's the ultimate impact on us as human beings. So they're the four meanings of aql that we have. Now, the Imam then puts the question, why do humans differ in their aql? How are we meant to understand this? He says that difference only arises in relation to the first, the third, and the fourth, not the second. Differences arise in the first, the second, the first, the third, and the fourth, not the second. Because when one knows that two is greater than one also knows the impossibility that a body cannot be both moving and still. Is there anyone in this room that's going to differ about that? Nobody. Everyone in that sense of aql is the same. There's no difference. But in our ability to determine observational phenomena, i.e. fire burning wool, water quenching thirst. Every person will come to that conclusion at different points. Someone may throw 5 balls of cotton and determine, yeah, that thing does that. Someone may need to sit there the whole day just to make sure. Right? Difference. Someone could be readily able to employ the 4th sense of aql to understand that actually this action has a consequence that I don't like. I'm not going to do it. Another person could just, if that weren't the case, we'd all be the same. So we differ in this 3rd and 4th usage of the term aql. And because of that, you find that we all engage in different things. But the second meaning of aql, no one disagrees with. No one differs in, I beg your pardon, because we all know that something that's dead cannot be living at the same time. Now, and so the first meaning of aql then is a foundation, it's a source, the innate ability. The second is the immediate branching off from that. The first sort of flowering, if you like, is that you come to know these things, these modalities, these states. It's the first branching off. That now prepares you and makes you ready. It makes it possible for you to engage in reasoning. Hence, you're legally responsible. And these first 2 are innate in us. They're given to you. Meaning you don't need to do anything. As soon as you're born, you have the innate ability. And as soon as you reach a certain age, no one has to sit you down and say, by the way, 2 is greater than 1. You just get it. Right? So these 2 are innate. But the 3rd and the 4th are acquired. In other words, empirical observations, and the 4th, which is knowing the consequences, we acquire them. It's not something that we're given to. They're not innate in us. Now, from the above, what should be clear is that what the aql doesn't mean. It doesn't mean statements such as, I think this, or my personal opinion is that, or such and such a person says that, or they think this. Now, why? Because this is just mere opinion, and not just mere opinion, it's unqualified opinion. It has no relation to the aql in any relevant sense. The aql here does not mean opinion in any way. When we have the aql, what we're able to do is to utilize the ability that Allah has given us. For instance, in relation to our scripture, the earlier question of the aql and the Quran, we use the ability that Allah has given us to develop and formulate a set of methodological principles through which we can determine the meaning of scripture. If we didn't do that, then what we're saying is that we have scripture, but we have no way of determining what it means. In other words, the question that's been put is not even a question. It's either the aql or the naql. It's either the Quran or your aql. Which one? It makes no sense. Because how will you be able to determine what the Quran means? Because the thing that people are really afraid of is that, am I using my opinion, my aql to determine? No, you're using your aql to formulate, as the A'imma have, a set of principles, a methodology. You then bring this methodology to bear on interpreting the Quran. Now, different scholars put together and put forward different methodologies. That's why you have a difference in how you understand language. The Hanafis have a way, the Shafis have a way, the Malikis have a way. And at the level of method, they're all valid. And because they're all valid as a method, you're going to get different conclusions as a result. That's not saying opinion. That's the very essence of using the gift that Allah has given you to determine what He's telling you. There's no other way. Now, the second, this is the third now, point I want to make here is that when we speak about the aql in terms of taklif, what is taklif means that we are morally responsible in front of Allah. He will judge us for our actions. And if you look at the conditions for taklif, i.e. what makes us morally responsible, they say someone has to be aqil, baligh, salimul hawas, that you have to be have aql, and you have to be sound of hearing and sound of sight, right? And you must have attained to puberty, right? Now, if you think that these are three or four conditions, they're not. It's one condition. The condition is aql, and the others are just explanations of it. Because puberty is just a way of explaining when you ordinarily reach aql. And how the soundness of your senses is just another way of saying that the senses are windows to capture bits of the world that you can use to bring your aql to bear on it. There's no other reason why they would mention the aql. That's why someone who has no hearing and no sight has no taklif. They won't be judged by Allah. No. But they still have, they're still humans in that sense, but they're not judged because why? They don't have the relevant access to the world such that the aql can bring its ability to what it does to bear on the world. It doesn't have that. Now, what is the basis of our taklif then? The aql. The basis of us being morally responsible in front of Allah, it's the very reason we're responsible agents. For example, are plants, are they living? They're living. Are they morally responsible in front of Allah? No. Why? They have no aql. Are animals living? Are they morally responsible? No. Why? Because they have no aql. So with all the above in mind, if someone says something such as don't use your intellect in the matters of deen, and by that they mean not to use what we've just described above, what they're essentially saying is this, that the very thing that Allah has gifted you with to know Him, the very thing that makes you different from animals and all other sentient beings, the very thing that is the basis for why you will stand responsible before Allah, you shouldn't use that very thing. Makes no sense. We wouldn't have anything to answer for them. And so this is it's a slightly more technical aspect of the Imam's work, but believe me, it's not compared to anything else that he would discuss in books of kalam, more technical philosophical theology. But it's important to get those meanings clear in our mind, that the word aql isn't something that comes with one meaning. It has a number of meanings which are used in different ways, but they relate to one another, as we've just said. And that the aql doesn't mean opinion, and the aql isn't something that should be disparaged. It's the most noble thing that we have in our tradition through which we come to know Allah Azza wa Jal. So inshallah, I'm going to stop here.
وجد بالنوال منه إليّ